It was a warm, dusty afternoon in the wide hills of Cedar Ridge. The sun hung lazily in a cloudless sky, casting long shadows over wheat fields that rustled like whispers. The road winding through the valley was narrow and cracked, bordered by wildflowers and crooked fence posts. Birds flitted between the branches of sun-baked trees. It was the kind of place most people passed through without ever stopping, but today a sleek black Bentley did stop. The car hummed down the road, a machine far too polished for its rustic surroundings. Its tinted windows flashed like mirrors, reflecting the golden fields it cut through. Inside, seated in smooth leather, was Celeste Hawthorne. Her manicured hands rested on the steering wheel, adorned with rings that glittered in the sunlight. She was a woman carved from confidence and control, every movement deliberate, every choice precise. Her ivory pantsuit had been tailored in Milan. Her sunglasses cost more than most people's rent, and at that moment she was very, very lost. Celeste glanced at the screen built into the dashboard. "Recalculating route," it said, for the third time in 5 minutes. Her signal bars had vanished somewhere back near the last intersection. She huffed and touched the screen again, her patience slipping away like water through her fingers. Then the car jolted. A warning flashed on the screen. "Engine malfunction. Pull over immediately." Her brow furrowed. "What?" "No." The car coughed. A loud clicking sound came from under the hood. Then silence. The Bentley rolled to a slow, defeated stop at the edge of the road. Celeste stared at the steering wheel. Unbelievable. She climbed out of the car, stepping into the dry dirt with a cautious expression. Her heels sank slightly into the ground. She looked around. Nothing but fields, no houses, no signs, no cell reception. She was utterly alone. Celeste opened the trunk, rummaged for a signal booster. Nothing. She tried restarting her phone. Still nothing. She looked down the road. A mile or so in the distance stood a large, slanted red barn. Beyond it, a faint outline of a small house. With no other options, she began to walk. Every step was a struggle. The sun bore down on her. Dust clung to her clothes. Her shoes weren't meant for gravel. But she kept moving, unwilling to let this setback turn into a defeat. As she neared the barn, she heard a voice behind her. "You lost, ma'am?" She turned quickly, startled. A man stood near a faded blue tractor, wiping his hands with a rag. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and a kind face framed by a graying beard. A straw hat shaded his eyes. His clothes were plain. Denim overalls, a rolled-up shirt, boots caked in dirt. His hands looked like they had built 100 fences and held 1,000 tools. Celeste adjusted her sunglasses. "My car broke down. Back down that road. I've been walking for—" She glanced at her watch, which had stopped working too. "Too long." The man stepped forward, nodding. "Eli Beckett, that's my farm over there." He pointed toward the house beyond the barn. "Phone lines work fine inside. No cell towers this deep in the valley. You can come in, rest a bit, make a call." She looked at him, wary. But there was something grounded in his voice, something honest. "I'd appreciate that," she said. Eli led her down a worn path through the barnyard. Chickens darted out of their way. A goat peeked at her through the fence. The farmhouse was old but clean, with paint peeling in places and flowers blooming wildly along the porch. Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon and hay. Quilts were draped across the couch, and framed photos lined the walls. Children, dogs, a woman with warm eyes. The air was quiet, heavy with memories. Celeste sat stiffly at the kitchen table, glancing at her surroundings like an alien in a foreign world. Eli filled a kettle and set it on the stove. "Would you like some tea?" he asked. "Do you have espresso?" He chuckled. "Not exactly, but this is chamomile and lemon balm, real herbs from the garden. Calms the nerves." She sighed and nodded. He poured her a cup and set it in front of her. The ceramic was chipped. The tea was steaming. "There's no one else here?" she asked after a moment. "Just me and Boomer," Eli said, nodding to the old hound snoozing by the door. "Wife passed away a few years ago. Kids left for the city, Ohio. I write 'em, they write back sometimes." She took a small sip. To her surprise, the tea was soothing. "What brings you all the way out here, anyway?" he asked, easing into the chair across from her. "I'm looking at land for a new project, a resort, actually, eco-luxury, wellness escape, that kind of thing." He raised an eyebrow. "Out here?" She nodded. "There's a property not far from here, the old Leicester. Land, perfect for what I need, streams, isolation. It's undeveloped, which is ideal." Eli leaned back. "That'd be 40 acres of stubborn soil and windstorms. Used to be a dairy farm, but it dried up with the family's fortune." "I know, but that's the thing, I see potential. With investment, design and marketing, it could be the next Aspen retreat." He didn't respond right away. He studied her, his face unreadable. "Those folks been asking 5 times what it's worth," he said finally. "They heard rich folks are sniffing around." She gave a small smile. "They're not wrong." Eli stood to check the phone. After a few attempts, he shook his head. "Storm last night probably knocked the lines again. The tow truck will have to wait until tomorrow. Closest mechanic's 40 miles out." She blinked. "So I'm stuck." He looked at her gently. "Not forever, but for tonight, maybe. I've got a spare room. It's not a hotel, but it's clean. You can stay here if you like." Celeste stared out the window. The sky had begun to darken. Clouds gathered on the hills like bruises. Rain was coming. She sighed. "Fine. One night." He showed her the room, small with a patchwork quilt on the bed and a tiny window overlooking the barn. The bathroom had a curtain instead of a door and towels that had seen better days. She washed her face, changed into a simple white cotton shirt from her bag, and returned to the kitchen where the smell of stew filled the air. Eli served her a bowl of thick vegetable stew with a side of fresh bread. She raised an eyebrow but took a bite. It was amazing. "Where'd you learn to cook like this?" "Farmers don't have takeout," he said with a smile. "You learn by hunger." They ate in silence for a while. Then, as thunder rolled outside, they began to talk. At first, the conversation was simple. Then it deepened. Eli spoke of the land, of watching it change, of losing friends to banks and time. He spoke of love, his wife, who had died of cancer, who had once danced barefoot under the moon. He spoke of children who had grown up and grown distant. Celeste found herself speaking too, of growing up in Nevada, of working 3 jobs while building her business, of how even now, surrounded by success, she often felt completely alone. "I haven't slept a full night in 5 years, she admitted. Eli nodded. "You work hard, but that kind of tired doesn't come from work." She looked at him. "What does it come from?" "Running too long without stopping." That night, as the storm beat softly against the windows, she lay in the small bed and stared at the ceiling. For once, she didn't check her phone. She didn't draft emails in her head. She didn't feel like she had to be anyone. In the morning, the world was bright and clean. Sunlight broke through mist, casting a glow over the fields. She stepped outside barefoot, her toes curling into the dewy grass. The Bentley sat in the distance, still lifeless. Eli was in the barn, tending to a young calf. She walked over, curious. "Can I help?" He looked up in surprise, then smiled. "Grab that feed bucket." She spent the morning learning to care for animals, her perfect hands smudged with dirt, her hair pulled back, and she laughed, freely without calculation. When the tow truck arrived that afternoon, she stood beside her car, quiet. Eli approached. "So, back to the city." She looked at him, then at the hills, then at the barn. "Maybe, but not for good." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "I still want that land," she said, "but not for a resort. I want to build a co-op for local." Farmers, a place where people can come to learn, to connect, to slow down. I'll fund it, I'll market it, but I need someone who understands the land. Eli stared at her. You serious? She nodded. You help me, let me help others, but I need a partner. He laughed, shaking his head. You're full of surprises, Miss Hawthorne. You haven't seen anything yet. A year later, the fields of Cedar Ridge were blooming again. Where the Leicester land had stood dry and forgotten, now stood the Hawthorne and Beckett Cooperative, a patchwork of hope and hard work. There were no infinity pools, but there were herb gardens, sunrise yoga in a hayloft, classes on sustainable farming. People came from the city to feel the soil in their hands. Celeste still ran her company, but some weekends she could be found barefoot in the fields, harvesting basil or feeding goats, her heels tucked away in the trunk of an old car. And somewhere in the breeze, in the rustling wheat, there was laughter, soft, real and rooted.